Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. I am Councilman Tony Brancatelli. Welcome to the Development Planning Sustainability Committee meeting, Tuesday, June 9th, 2020. I would like to call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Brancatelli.
Here.
Cleveland. Griffin. Harrison.
Here.
Bashir Jones.
Here.
McCormick.
Present.
Light.
Present.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. The Development Planning Sustainability Committee hearing is being held during the COVID-19 emergency declaration in accordance with Ohio's open meeting laws as amended by Sub-House Bill 197. This meeting is being held using the Zoom platform and is being live streamed on YouTube and on Cleveland's Channel 20. It also can be seen on Cleveland City Council website and from City Council's Facebook page. In accordance with Ohio open meetings regulations as amended by Sub-House Bill 197, notice of this committee hearing was publicly posted. Please note this committee hearing will be conducted as all committee hearings in accordance with council rules and Robert's Rules of Order. The chair will facilitate the meeting and call on persons to speak. If you wish to speak, please use the raise your hand option on Zoom. Please limit your comments to matters before this committee. As usual practice, any actions voted on during this committee will be done by voice vote and called and recorded by the committee clerk. Council Rule 15 requires that all legislation be heard by committees and that members of the committee recommend whether legislation to be passed by the full council. As our usual practice, the vote to recommend will be done by voice vote and recorded by the committee clerk. Thank you all for adjusting your time, and certainly thank you for, we have a pretty robust agenda today, a number of incredibly important pieces, and especially given the circumstances we are, our CDBG budget is incredibly important to the well-being of our citizens and our communities. I will call on the director, and the first ordinance we have is an amendment to the ordinance that we've already passed, our HUD CDBG budget, ordinance 447/2020 by council members Brancatelli and Kelly by department requests, an emergency ordinance to amend sections 1 and 3 of ordinance number 176/2020 passed February 24th, 2020, relating to grants from the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development for the fiscal year 2020 under the Title I of the Housing and Community Development Act of 1974 for the 2020 Federal Home Investment Partnerships Act program, Emergency Solutions Grant Program, and the Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS program. Director, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And as you said, this is a small change, but moving in the right direction. So we appreciate it. Tom Sled's our budget manager is on the line as well if you have any in-depth questions. But the change from February 24th, when council approved the budget of $29,732,538, that change is an additional $319,239. The majority of it is $187,655 in CDBG funds. And in those funds, you'll see in the attachments that we sent you, most of those funds are in the home repair area. We always have more demand than we're able to fulfill in that area. And so that's where we are recommending most of the additional funds go. There was also an increase of $116,601 for HOPWA that will be administered by Public Health. So that's what we're asking you to approve today. And again, happy to take any questions you might have.
So in essence, this $300,000 represents about 1% change in the budget. And as outlined, the budget adjustments, as you've stated. Are there any specific questions from my colleagues on the budget amendment? No specific, sorry, Councilman Bashir Jones.
Oh. Councilman, you're on. Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Thank you, Chair. Chair, to the director, I've been getting a lot of information about federal dollars coming in. I've been hearing these conversations, but not quite sure what they're talking about. Is this the same thing?
Through the chair to the councilman, no, but you're not the only one who's confused. So, it's all of these things are happening in almost parallel, right? We got our final numbers this is our regular plan year 2020 allocation that we went through during the budget process. The umbrella legislation that I believe you passed last week as a council allowed the city to accept a little over $19 million in funding that's specific to people who have been affected by COVID-19. And that's in addition to and specific to those issues. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about that in a little bit.
Okay. So we'll get to that. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Director.
Thank you. No further questions. Madam Clerk, will you please call the vote for ordinance 447, 2020?
Francatelli,
Yes?
Cleveland, Griffin, Hairston,
Yes.
Bashir Jones,
Yes.
McCormick,
Yes.
Blythe.
Yes.
On ordinance number 447, 6 yeas, no nays.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. This will move to Finance Committee and Council as we do our Council of the Whole. The other piece relative to 447, 2020, members were sent the CDC funding recommendations. And I wanted to, Director, if you wanted to make a quick comment about the funding recommendations that came about from the grant proposals.
Sure. We had planned, as we often do, to take council through the process, and I was going to have Commissioner Anderson do that, or did you just want to see if there were questions to the recommendations that were sent out?
It would be great if Commissioner Anderson could give a brief process overview. I know Joe Titron's on as well, and he was involved in that process.
Yeah.
Just a brief summary of the process, and then we can take questions.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Joy.
All right. The department received proposals from all of our current grantees. We have 17 CDCs, all submitted renewal funding requests, requesting a combined total of about $8.2 million. The recommendations that were sent to City Council total $1,121,932 for just the departmental line item funding. The review committee used pretty much the same scoring platform that we've had in effect for the last 3 years to establish a baseline funding recommendation after grouping all of our CDCs into 3 tier groups. The highest scoring CDCs scoring 80 out of 100 points or higher were in tier group 1, and they received a baseline award of $60,000. The lowest scoring CDCs scoring under 50 points received $20,000 as a baseline award. And then the middle group received $40,000. From there, we had a layered scoring process that took 5 items into consideration. The first was the percentage of low mod income area residents in the CDC service area. We also looked at the total population in the CDC service area. We provided additional points and funding to organizations, to CDCs that are serving an expanded area, meaning that they are at the request of the department serving neighborhoods that are in most cases contiguous to their service area, but they're serving an area outside of their primary area at the request of the department. We also looked at housing production and gave additional funding and emphasis on exterior and substantial single-family housing rehab, multifamily housing rehab, and new housing construction. So organizations that were high producing in their housing development and were proposing to do at least what they did last year. We provided additional points and funding for those organizations. In this category, we also made a distinction between organizations that are developers versus those that are housing partners, giving more points and emphasis to the agencies that are taking on the more aggressive role of being the primary developer of a project. And then the final category that we looked at was performance. And that is a more comprehensive scoring around how the agency is submitting their accomplishment information to us on a monthly basis, their ability to spend the funding effectively and to decertify significantly less funding than others. And then after that, we had some other special considerations that the director will talk about that also was factored into the funding recommendation.
Thank you. Director?
And really, I mean, the other considerations that we looked at were based on some circumstances that specific CDCs have faced over the last year. And we did outline those in the memo as well, but I know you just received those recently. So we did look at Detroit Shoreways amount and made sure that it reflected the collaboration with Cadell and the significant additional work that had to go into, as well as the spinoff of Metro West. We did retain Greater Collinwood at $80,000 because the organization is just in year 2 of taking on such a significantly larger area, as really showing a significant amount of accomplishments, and had the additional work and really supported the community around keeping Collinwood High School open. And, we are really cognizant of the fact that once this isn't a 1 year or 2 year or even 5 year process as we work to support a neighborhood and an organization, that if we're looking at doing that, as long as we're seeing a positive trajectory, we need to recognize that, even if in some ways, and it is clear that in some ways Greater Collinwood is still struggling. Slavic Village is almost a slightly different point of view. They were 1 point from the next iteration above where they normally would be. There's just tremendous work that's being done in that area. They've consistently performed and are seeing ever more challenges in the community. So those were just a few areas where we made slight adjustments. And we always have to look at this. This is a competitive process where there is a finite amount of funds, and we're cognizant of that. And yet this is a community development ecosystem, and we have to be mindful of the fact that the investments that we make, we have an eye on where we're going in the future and where we can help organizations in other ways. And so with some of the organizations that we're working with that are still struggling, like for example, Mount Pleasant Now Development Corporation, where the funding is less that we're recommending, there's a lot of wraparound services and support that we'll be working on to support them with Cleveland Neighborhood Progress as well this year, so that we continue a very strong focus on shoring up the southeast side of the city. So we're happy to take any questions that you all have.
Great, and thank you for the hard work on this. I know this is always a challenge every year, and this year, adding to that challenge is working remotely and trying to get your team together and have the broad representation of the committee members that you have from across the city. And then, of course, dealing with this, the different issues we're facing today, these CDCs become even that much more important as agents within our communities. Open it up for questions. If there's any questions regarding the CDC, I know folks can reach out directly to the director or to the assistant director or Commissioner Joy Anderson if you have additional questions. If not, thank you for the CDBG and HUD update, and we'll move on to our next piece of legislation.
I do want to, Councilman, I'm sorry, I just did want to mention one thing that's really important.
Go ahead.
We're about 6 weeks behind where we normally, I don't know if there's ever a normal, right? But where we would have been based on, we were ready to share recommendations, at the end of March. And of course, for obvious reasons, that didn't happen. But with that in mind, we have a pretty aggressive schedule that we'll need all of your help to execute on that Commissioner Anderson has put forward. Where we're working with Joe Titron, who we so appreciate in this process, to have all PIFs submitted by June 23rd. So if you can share that with your colleagues and others, your colleagues, sorry, that it's really critical that you make that June 23rd date, because it's difficult for the CDCs to adjust their objectives and their plan unless they know how much money is coming their way. And we're happy to work with you and Joe on adjustments or, ensuring you understand where you are today to make that June 23rd goal. Then what we'll ask of the CDC is that they have a draft back to us by June 30th. So it's very aggressive, but there'll probably be minor changes, and we'll certainly work with them if their changes are more specific, with the goal of ultimately by July 17th, having contracts that we could send down for certification. So we know that might be a little bit too much of a push, but every day that we take longer means another day that a CDC is, working without reimbursements or, they understand.
Yep.
And we're kind of in this together. So the first step is that June 23rd.
No, I think. Thank you for the reminder on that. Certainly, Joe can reach out to the council members as well as to the executive assistants who can help make sure we get those PIFs signed and moved on. It's not just a matter of our timing, but it's also with the law department and with finance. Everybody's working on very short crew time, so it gets condensed along with all the other work that people are doing. So that's vitally important. So thank you, Director, for that reminder. Everybody got it? Oh, I'm sorry. Councilman Blaine Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just very briefly, and I just want to commend Director Maness, because I never knew how difficult the CDBG world is until I really did a deep dive with the Buckeye expansion last year. It's very intense. It's a very intense world. Also working closely with CNP, Cleveland Neighborhood Progress. We're really examining the landscape around CDCs as well. So I'd encourage all of my colleagues to really stay in tune with this, because the CDC world is changing, and we're going to have to probably change and make some adjustments with it. A couple of questions that I had is, Director Maness, I didn't hear you. I know I was distracted for a minute, but did you say that you also gave a little extra funding to Buckeye or BBC for their expansion in the Buckeye?
Yes, through the chair to the councilman, one of the criteria that Joy went through is for an expanded area. And so for the few CDCs who have expanded areas, we added a $20,000 award, because it is a huge lift to be doing that.
Great, and that's good to know, because as we spend our CDBG dollars, and a lot of people know, I have a lot of area to cover, and just trying to manage how we make those investments are critical. The other thing that I really wanted to really ask you is, does every ward, and I know this is because we're into the equity conversation, and equity and equality are not the same thing, but does every ward have the same amount of low to moderate income housing or do you have like a ranking system? Do you know which wards have more low and moderate housing than others? And I'm asking that for a reason, because I really would love to see what wards rank in that category to have the most low to moderate income houses.
So to the councilman through the chair, one of the things that we factor in here is areas that have a higher low to moderate income population, but that's different than what you're asking, which is housing. And one does tend to trend to the other, but we have done quite a bit of that analysis and would be happy to share it with council, but we don't factor, what the two things we factored in was low to moderate income census area. And then this year we started looking as well as the population, because that's a different metric that we hadn't looked at, but just, you know, the sheer number of people that an organization is looking at. But by ward, we can share that information with you from a housing stock perspective.
It'd be good to know, because, and if I'm not mistaken, and maybe Miss Robinson can kind of chime in on this, as well as you and Mr. Wackers. Aren't there stipulations that HUD dollars are supposed to be used in those low to moderate income areas? And if that is the case, I have areas in Ward 6 that really wouldn't probably qualify for those low to mod dollars, but then I have other areas that will, qualify over the top. And I'm sure that every council person in here can pretty much say the same thing. And I'm trying to understand, how do you do that? By census tract, SPAs?
Yeah. So what I would suggest is we can actually have a separate session on this and actually get an update, because it is based on census tract. It is based on slum and blight, on use of funds. And that's always been, the bad news is most of the city is eligible outside of a couple census tracts for CDBG dollars. But the good news is you are seeing some neighborhoods trend, but it is by census tract. And I think having a deeper dive where we look at both the typology of the housing stock, the conditions, the ratings, as well as the income, I think we can break it down, not just by ward, but mostly by SPA is what we've been using as our analytics on some of these dollars. Director?
That's good. And I would welcome that, Mr. Chair, because I do think it is a deeper dive. I was just trying to get a grasp of just the basics today, but I do agree that we need to do a deeper dive, because as I'm investing the money that we get for CDBG allocations, I'm looking at how I can more strategically invest. How do I identify gaps? How do I identify who needs more help? All of those different things. So that deep dive would help me a lot.
Yep. And the director is right now we're going through the tax abatement and incentives analysis, which is also looking at each of the neighborhoods, and that'll shed some light on some of those very questions. I'm sorry, Director.
I would also encourage, and everybody, please excuse my eyes, when it gets past 85 degrees or below 20, I'm not smoking some of that stuff that we passed earlier this year. I just want to. But the bottom line is I really want to make sure we do that deep dive, Mr. Chair. I will say that I'm encouraged by the Southeast side. If we're going to advocate for our own, I want to make sure we advocate for our colleagues as well. Our Southeast side is suffering. So I'm glad that you're looking at supporting there. And I do want to make an apology to Ms. Anderson. I mistakenly said Ms. Robinson. You're so quiet. You allow us to mistake your name for Robinson, and it's actually Anderson. I apologize. But thank you, Mr. Chair. I really
thank you. Director, did you want to add anything to that? Okay. Thank you. So we're going to move on. The next piece of legislation we have is 448-2020 by Council Members Brancatelli and Kelly by department request. An emergency ordinance authorizing the Director of Community Development to exercise the second option to renew contract CT 8006 BS 2018-129 with Cyper Ridge LLC to implement a loan servicing system and community development tracking reporting system. Director?
So thank you, Chair. I am going to hand this off to our County Manager, Matt Rosen, to explain how vitally important the system is to our ability to support all of you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. This is like I said, the second option of the Cyber Ridge loan software system We had started going live last year, May 1st. And it basically replaced our DOS-based system that we had been using for 20 plus years. And I mean, so far, I'm just very happy with the way the system's working. With the prior system, we could not do simple things like look up loans by a person's name. You know, if they only had their name, we had to look through 50 pages of PDFs. Yeah, there was no note taking in the system. We had to go back to the hard file to be able to talk to clients who called in about their loan. So now it's all kind of systematic, and really think it helps our ability to handle our clients, and of course them being citizens at the same time. Our billings actually can be run now on printers that aren't dot matrix. That was helpful. And we actually had to get away from it because the old system only used XP, which the city no longer services. So for the price, I think, you know, the $26,000 per year really is a great deal for us, as we have a database of over 4,000 loans and roughly $200 million.
And you're satisfied with the system? You think it's been a great advantage for you?
Yeah, and I did forget to mention, we would be really in a tough spot now because it's you know, internet based system. Last time we would have to be in the office, and you know, it's already really helped a lot. I want to throw out there, I think you had a question from someone in your ward who was calling in about their loan. We were able to answer it, you know, within minutes. So that would not be going on right now if we didn't have this.
Yeah, that was very helpful. It was closing a real estate transaction that was very time sensitive, and I appreciate you know, the turnaround time on those. Any questions on 448-2020? I don't see any hands raised. I will turn to the clerk for a vote for 448-2020. Clerk?
Riccatelli,
Yes.
Cleveland,
Yes.
Griffin,
Yes.
Hairston,
Yes.
Bashir Jones,
Yes.
McCormick,
Yes.
Slight.
Yes.
On ordinance 448-2020, 7 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. 448-2020 stands approved. The next piece of legislation we have is 449-2020 by council members Brancatelli and Kelly by department request. An emergency ordinance authorizing the Director of Community Development to administer the Community Engagement Healthy Homes Initiative to enter into one or more contracts with various community development corporations for the purpose of hiring community engagement specialists by neighborhood to improve the quality of life for residents in the city's housing stock, to enter into professional services contracts for acquisition of software and training to conduct the initiative, and to make purchases of materials, equipment, supplies, and services needed to conduct the initiative. Director?
Thank you, Chair. And I'm going to hand it over in just a minute to Nina Holzer to give you an update on this program. But I think many of you know you helped to support the Community Engagement Healthy Home Initiative. It was now 2 Februarys ago. The initiative really got up and running in fall of this past year. And as you have pointed out, had many challenges in getting started, but I think you'll hear we've really been effective, and I think in many ways supportive of the city at a time when we most needed outreach in the neighborhoods, and it's been really exciting to see. So I was about to hand it off to Nina, but I think we may have just lost her. Oh, okay, she's back. Good. I was like, I could probably do it, but I would never have done it justice. So perfect timing, Nina. Go ahead.
Sorry about that. I'm using 2 different screens, and my home computer has been giving me nothing but grief over last week. So I promise I won't disappear again. Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for having me. Would it be helpful for me to give any sort of high-level summary of the initiative, or just talk about accomplishments over the last eight or so months?
I think it'd be helpful, a brief summary and then jump into some of the accomplishments.
Okay, great. I'm gonna be looking at my other computer, so I'm not ignoring
fine.
it by any means. So the Community Engagement Healthy Homes Initiative is a partnership between the City of Cleveland and community development corporations that seeks to improve the quality of life of residents of the City of Cleveland through enhancements to the city's housing stock. Community engagement specialists have been hired at CDCs across the city. Their work involves collecting property condition data, assessing neighborhood housing and quality of life issues, and working with residents and landlords to resolve concerns and challenges. This includes helping homeowners, renters, and landlords understand and remove environmental hazards and bring their homes to housing code compliance. Resource navigation and education is central to our work. Specialists build relationships with residents and landlords and connect them to programs and services that they're eligible for. Additionally, they host trainings and workshops on a variety of housing topics. And finally, they help support our Department of Community Development's exterior paint program by helping residents and landlords apply for and complete the program by providing relevant inspections. It's really a high-level overview of the work of our Healthy Homes Initiative. I joined the city last July, and we spent several months getting the initiative structure figured out. We then also spent a couple of months in the hiring process. So most of our community engagement specialists were hired between November 2019 and January 2020. And I'm going to focus really on accomplishments since about December of last year. So as I mentioned, we hired 14 community engagement specialists who work out of 12 community development corporations across the city. And again, they are community development corporation employees, not city employees. We held a series of trainings in January with the Department of Aging, Department of Public Health, Department of Building and Housing, and Case Western Reserve University's Center on Urban Poverty and Community Development. The specialists have been thoroughly trained on how to research properties using Citizen Access, MyPlace, and Case's NST database. Additionally, Case has built out a Healthy Homes Initiative section for us to use to help with data collection and for further researching those properties. We have held 4 cohort meetings, so full group meetings with the specialists, 2 in person and 2 by video conference. At our 2 most recent cohort meetings, we had presenters join us from the Legal Aid Society, Lead Safe Cleveland Coalition, Department of Building and Housing, Cleveland Housing Network, and Cleveland Restoration Society. These cohort meetings are really beneficial. They give our specialists an opportunity to engage with one another for peer-to-peer learning, technical assistance, skills building, and to hear from individuals who oversee programs relevant to their work. So it's been great in terms of partnership building as well. Our specialists also joined the mayor's COVID-19 outreach team, helping to disseminate information about the pandemic in their neighborhoods as part of their work. And then finally, some numbers, because we all like numbers. I'm a data person, I love numbers. In a recent memo to the mayor, we shared this information and data as of mid-April. So as of mid-April, properties surveyed were 9,947, though I've been in the process of inputting data that we receive with the reimbursement request monthly. And I believe that we're close to 10,750 properties surveyed since about February. Properties referred to community development were at 975. Properties referred to outside agencies were at about 490. And then properties referred to building and housing, we have 477, though there's a caveat with that number. The properties we refer to building and housing are referred because they're OVV, they might need board up, they're fire damaged, they might be vacant and being recommended for condemnation, or there might be suspected illegal activity or operations on the premises. We strive not to refer occupied properties to building and housing unless there's a major health and safety violation that threatens the livelihood of the resident or neighbors. And this number, this 477 number, also includes 175 plus properties that were referred to building and housing through Slavic Village Development's yearly vacant property survey. So the number is much higher just because the Healthy Homes Specialist at SVD was transferring over into the role at the same time that last year's vacant property survey was wrapping up. So again, these aren't the final counts for the program year. I'm waiting on 2 more rounds of reimbursements, and we'll be getting additional data through that. And then while the pandemic definitely had an impact on our ability to do our work, I'm really pleased and impressed in how the specialists were able to pivot and sought out new ways of engaging residents over the last few months, from moving to online engagements to helping deliver food. They've really thought about alternate pathways to connecting with residents due to COVID-19, and have really worked hard to continue the resident engagement work even with the pandemic going on. In terms of the paint program, as I mentioned, the specialists also help with those inspections. As of this morning, they had completed 467 paint program inspections since April 29th, my birthday. And then finally, I know that a number of you may have worked with specialists in your service areas or service areas that intersect with your wards. So I definitely would welcome and would love to hear any positive stories or accomplishments you may have observed as well. And with that, those are my high level accomplishments over the last 8 or so months. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about the work, our accomplishments, our focus. That's it for me.
Great. Yeah, it's just been amazing to see as this program continues to grow and expand and take on more responsibilities. It's been real positive. Again, especially during this time where we need as much community engagement as we can get, and having people out there. I'm a big advocate as people have been hanging information on doors, just walking the community itself, and having that visibility is tremendously important for residents to see that we're out there, and we have staff that are out there that are really concerned about what's going on right now. I am open to questions. I'm looking for hands up. And Charles leaves the room. You could have raised your hand and I would have excused you. Great. No further questions. No questions. I will move, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll for approval of 449-2020?
Brancatelli,
Yes?
Cleveland,
Yes.
Griffin, Hairston,
Yes.
Bashir Jones,
Yes.
McCormick,
Yes.
Slight.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, on 449-2020, 7 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you, and Nina, certainly thank you for all your hard work out there. It's been a great success story, and I think we need to continue to make sure people see all the good work that's going on with our ambassadors that are out there representing us. With that, we're going to turn to a presentation around the CARES Act. I know a number of folks have been asking about the competitive grant program that's been out there requesting proposals for service. I know there's a hotline out there already for tenants and landlords for rental assistance. Director, you're on.
Yes, thank you. And I can just give you a brief overview. We sent out RFPs or applications for people to respond to for basic needs, for rental assistance, for HOPWA, and for homeless and special needs on May 13th. And on May 27th, we had 54 RFP responses, totaling requests for $21,911,549. We had a review committee that we were really thankful for the support, both from departments, so like all the senior services were reviewed by aging, HOPWA by public health, and then some outside experts who could help supplement from enterprise and CNP our reviews. And we did those reviews through last week, through the first week of June, and have recommendations that we'll be sharing with the mayor this week. With the goal that we'll be able to share the awards with all of you, and then just as importantly, out in the field by the end of this week, with the idea that we're really hopeful that many of the partners that we're working with will be able to begin offering services as early as the first week of July. One of the main criteria in the RFP was readiness to execute, either that you were already doing this work or had experience in doing something very similar so you could ramp up quickly. The exception to that, to some extent, is rental assistance, because that's really new to any great scale across the country. Frankly, right now, we're spending a lot of time learning from our peers in other cities on how to do that work. So we feel really confident that we have the infrastructure in place now to support executing a slew of new contracts, and most importantly, that there'll be some relief for our residents. You mentioned the hotline. We set that up and started receiving calls on May 12th, and we've only had 31 calls or emails into that hotline, but more than half of those, not surprisingly, were about rental assistance. And we've responded to all of those, let them know that we'll have partners in place, and we'll notify them when the program is up and running and can be accessed. The only other thing I would say is that while we would love to have been moving even faster than we are, I think what's encouraging somewhat is that a lot of the support, we're kind of coming online just as some of the support infrastructure that some of our residents have had will begin to expire. Many people would have gotten support directly from the CARES Act, would have had unemployment insurance, may hopefully be starting back to work now. And then of course, housing court starts, over in the next couple of weeks. So while again, we would have always preferred to be quicker, I think we're going to start providing some very needed assistance just as there's a real gap.
Great. The different categories between food and rental assistance and homelessness, that's what you're going to outline once we get that detail back after the presentation with the administration.
Yes.
And so questions around the CARES Act, and we'll, as soon as we get that information, I'll make sure we forward it to all our colleagues. Councilman Bashir Jones.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So Chair, to the Director, the funding that's coming into the CARES Act, will each council person get a piece of that to work in their ward?
No, the CARES Act funding was very specific, that it went to residents that were experiencing hardship from COVID-19. So we need to determine and have some verification that a resident was affected by COVID-19 and therefore needs immediate relief. And we went through and surveyed through United Way, and then actually from direct input from providers and community development corporations, what the needs were out in the community. And while, we, Councilman, were really hoping that we might have been able to start doing things to really rebuild the economy or put put people back to work, we really had to be responsive to the fact that right now our community just needs food and shelter and support for seniors, broadband access. And so we brought a proposal to the administration in early May that was shared with council, where all of the dollars would go directly to residents for basic needs and rental assistance.
Okay, Chair, to the Director, with all due respect, that doesn't make any sense. And the reason why it doesn't make sense is because who would know better what our residents need than the people that we're working with the residents every day. So from what was just said, it basically skipped us, went to United Way and this way and that way, but the residents are coming to us directly to assist them. So who made it? Okay, Chair to the Director, my question is was that a federal mandate, or did the city make that decision to go everywhere else but through the council person?
So through the chair to the councilman, that is a city decision. So it's not a HUD decision. We were looking at input, and I think you're doing it right now. Food delivery, food access, senior services. It's not that we weren't listening, I think, to the input of of council people and people who are working out in the field. But under the mayor's emergency, the key was to bring the dollars out as quickly as possible at a time when there weren't council hearings, council wasn't meeting, but it is under the administration's authority, I believe, to have moved forward. I think with that in mind, the basic services that we're providing support for, the HUD lifted the public service cap because typically, these kind of things like utility assistance and food access aren't even allowable expenses with HUD dollars. But we were given the authority to spend HUD money in this way, specifically because across the country, there was a real sense that the first thing that had to happen was to ensure that people were fed and they had shelter.
Right. Thank you, Director. And this is no disrespect to you, Director. Chair and to Council President, that is absolutely ridiculous. Our issue is that money takes too long to get through on the other side for us to get the money out. The issue is not us. The issue is this rabbit hole, so to speak, of funding being able to come back to us to get to the community. We're with the community. We're with them every day. We hear their concerns more than anybody else that was just mentioned. We hear their concerns more than administration. We hear their concerns more than United Way. We hear their concerns more than anybody. They're walking right up to us. So why would we be out of that process when, if anything, the process should have been alleviated, whatever is the holdups on the administration side that makes the money move in a drip-like fashion, that should have been removed. But getting the money through to us to get to the people, that shouldn't have been the response. That shouldn't have been the answer. So,
well, yeah, a couple of quick responses. One, I certainly know it feels like a drip-like as far as getting money out. But for those of us who have sadly been around dealing with the federal requirements, this is land speed for them. This is record speed for the federal government to get money out on the street, and record speed for them to pass out circulars that say, here's things that we can do to make this happen a little faster. As much as it seems slow, it is actually rather quickly. And given the crisis that we're in with COVID and the limited amount of time that folks are actually in the office, I think they've done a wonderful job of piecing this together. We did have a session on this earlier a month ago when we talked about things that were important to us, like rental assistance, like food assistance, homelessness. So we did have some input, and we did share that input with the director a month ago when the money first got announced, I think the first week of April. And then we chimed in about 3 weeks later once we got into our Zoom meetings. But whether we are passing out assistance as council members directly, or whether it's being done through the community development, the timing doesn't change. It's still contracts that have to be done.
So if the timing doesn't change, Chair, then why remove us from the process? If the timing doesn't change, if it's the same timing, then all I'm saying, Chair, is that if this is the first time that the federal government has gotten it right, now you're getting it wrong by removing council out of the picture in a sense of, we know the people who are suffering. I know the people, I can tell you blocks and blocks of people right now who need to get those resources. So I just think that this is the wrong way to do it, because we know these people. We know our community. We know our neighbors.
Yeah. And that was specifically why it was important for us that there's a hotline and an email for people to reach out to. So that,
and that's the point, Chair. That's that exact answer is the reason why. What I'm saying, nobody's calling a hotline. I mean, some people are doing it, but overall, the people who need it don't have the capability to do that, especially when you talk about the digital divide. So nobody is sending an email, right? The libraries are closed.
Yeah, it's imperative on me when somebody comes to me and says, I need help on rental assistance, to hand them the phone number. Everybody has a phone. Call this
Everybody
phone
doesn't have a phone, Chair.
Okay, the majority of the people that are looking for help, I mean, to say, if you don't have a phone or if you don't have access to a phone, I mean, I understand the digital device.
You're homeless. In Ward 7,
right,
I have the largest I have the
That's
largest
right.
population of
Right.
homeless. If you could just let me finish,
Go
I have
ahead.
the largest population of homeless in my ward. They don't have a phone. That's the point that I'm making.
Yeah,
Is
and
that
that's,
no
and the
one,
point of reaching out to the
no one
organizations.
knows my
Right.
ward like me, Chair. And I'm
Right.
saying it's ridiculous to remove council out of the position
Right.
of being able to put resources right into the hands of the people that we know. Why would the administration do that? It doesn't make sense.
Can I just clarify one thing? I'm sorry, through the chair to the councilman, that I may not have stated correctly. So these are, as you said, HUD Community Development Block Grant and then Emergency Solutions Grant dollars. So while HUD did provide some flexibility where we can provide things that we normally don't, the public services like food and utility assistance, which we're not normally allowed to do, those funds can't be distributed directly from us, to residents. We are going to distribute them through social service partners that are out in the community. So they are out in the community, right? It's not going to be the city. It's going to
So
be
is that
direct.
FAMICOs? Is that CDCs?
Yeah,
What is
hold
that?
on. So just, that's what I was just saying. So we put, in our RFPs out on the street on May 13th, and we got responses back, and we'll be announcing who those folks are. Again, I'm hoping by the end of the week. And then it will be incredibly important that all of you refer people to those agencies, because one of the buckets that we actually asked for RFP responses on was referral services, because we know, as you said, often the people who most need support don't know how to get it. And they're not going to get it by coming to the city. They're going to get it because through trusted partners, to people they already work with, through people they know. And to your point, Councilman, many people, the person they're most comfortable going to for support or who they trust most is their council person. And so we'll really need your support in connecting residents to the providers that are announced. And as I mentioned, one of the main criteria of those providers was that they had experience. They knew what they were doing, so that, and that they had some capacity financially, so they could hit the ground running as soon as we gave them the award.
So Chair, once again, Chair, first Chair, thank you so much for that robust conversation. Thank you. I'm very passionate about making sure that our residents get what they need. And if you're saying, Chair, to the director, that those finances are going directly to places like Lutheran Ministries who are dealing with the homeless, they're going directly to Lexington Bell. I'm just speaking for my ward right now. Lexington Bell that deals directly with, daycare age students. If you're saying they're going directly to FAMICOs, then that makes me feel a lot better. United Way, though I love United Way, by the way, for all United Way people that are watching, I love United Way. I'm just saying that, FAMICOs is touching people a lot quicker than a United Way, so.
And Councilman, I truly apologize. It's not that, I don't want to minimize how engaged you are in your community. You are incredibly engaged in the community. You are out there every day, and you do know the needs as best as anyone, what's going on in your community. But those agencies that we work with and partner with,
Yes, sir.
like Lutheran Ministry, like Frontline, like Eden, those are the ones that have the professional engagement through the homeless. And those are where we want people to go through that structure and system, because it's not just a matter of that one touch of assistance. It's assistance for medical care, it's assistance for food services. It's all those wraparound services that we really want them to be able to get, that you've been advocating so hard for.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chair. Just in closing, Chair, is it possible that whatever organizations that is chosen from this RFP, that we're able to work directly with them in a sense? Because there's some organizations that just because they've been around doesn't mean that they've necessarily been successful. They just have longevity, and I don't know why they still get what they get. But is it possible, Chair, that, when that comes out for each of us in our own wards, that we're somewhat a part of, not necessarily guiding the funds or anything, but just making sure people are doing what they're supposed to be doing?
So I think that's a great recommendation. The director and I have talked about this before. There's, as horrible as it is, there's amazingly good stories within the funding that's coming in, and we should be telling that story over and over again. I think as the awards go out, we can have a DPS committee meeting, and we can have some of the directors come to us as we would if we were at City Hall, and talk about how they're engaging and how we can engage with them at one of our DPS committee meetings. That's a great idea.
And Chair, just the last thing, that's it right there, Chair. And I'm hoping that because I would love to be able to send people directly to whoever they are. I just wouldn't want to, these organizations have been given these contracts and they're just working, but they're not working with us. So we need to be able to send residents to them. And we don't want to be, I guess I speak for all my colleagues in this, is that we don't want to, a month or two after they've gotten the resources to then, sit down with them. We want to be engaged with them every step of the way. Chair, thank you for your patience, Chair.
Yeah, we can absolutely do that. The worst thing that can happen for us as council members is refer people to agencies that aren't getting back to them, that aren't being responsive. And I think having that partnership and working well, and I want to thank the director because that's an important part of how she looks at that relationship as well. Director, did you want to add anything? I think Councilman Slife or Councilman McCormick, did you have your hand up? Okay. Any further questions around the CARES Act? Council President Kelly, did you want to step in here?
Just everything that needs to be said has been said, but we just got to look at this, in terms of the administration of these federal dollars isn't simple. It's not that we as council don't have the back office, the infrastructure to quickly get it out. We're not set up as such. We couldn't just give it in one of our accounts and then just put an application to John James or something. It doesn't work that way. Question is whether every organization with capacity was able to bid, was able to become the provider of these funds. Ultimately, our job is just to facilitate that transaction and make sure that money reaches the people that need it. And the question we should all be asking isn't, who got it? It's better, is it getting out there, and is it with the agency that can best administer the funds? So I'm confident in the process. I recall the very day of the award and the anxiety that went around it. And of course, the first question was whether it was going to be cut up 17 ways, which it wasn't, because it can't be. It comes with, it is very well prescribed how these funds can be spent. And I'm confident they're being spent in that manner and in a process that was laid out for us in one of our first, I think it was our second Zoom meeting, in terms of what was all in this bucket of funds. So that's all. I think everything that needs to be said has been said.
Okay, great. Thank you, Director. We look forward to once those awards are announced, and then we'll circle back and get engaged with some of those key organizations that are going to be working on this. And if I can have Joe Titron send out that notice again that you had sent previously that has the phone numbers and contact information to make sure that all council members have that again. It's one of those things we got to keep repeating over and over again, so people get engaged with it. Any further questions? Councilman Kelly?
Mr. Chair, I just want to thank you and the director and everybody for being here. I'm going to respectfully have to sign off now for 2 o'clock. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And then we have a council meeting coming up on I forgot which date is it. Clerk, which date is our council meeting set for?
June 17th.
June 17th. Thank you. No further questions. We will call this meeting to adjourn. Thank you all very much and have a great day.